What's up guys, this is Rob with Black Hill Woodwork, and in today's video we're going to be making a nice simple gift or present. So you might be thinking, what kind of gift or present are we making? Well, we're going to be making a nice live edge bowl. If you've seen my videos before, you know I've made 100 of them, probably 1,000 of them, but I never really went into detail in exactly how I make them, so that's what this video is going to be about. So step one, get yourself a log. We are going to be using this. Maybe oak, not sure. Step two is get a chainsaw, or hopefully you're not using a handsaw to cut a log like this, but anything to cut some wood. We're not going to cut it completely in half, but we will be cutting it all the way through. Might sound confusing, but you'll understand what I'm saying in a second. So here's our log. The reason why I said we're not cutting it directly in half is because you have to look at the pith. We're going to be cutting about 1/2 inch to the right of the pith, so it's not in the bowl and it's not going to crack. If you have the pith in your bowl, most likely it will crack. Make sure both sides, both curves, are somewhat equal. You don't want it like this or like that. You want a nice straight line with both sides equal. Okay, the pith is not going to be in the bowl. There's a little bit of cracks right here because of the pith, but we should be turning most of that away and it should be good. So now grab your chainsaw, handsaw, whatever you got, and cut this thing in half. So here's our piece. Looks good. Now let's make a bowl blank. If you don't have a bandsaw, you could use any kind of saw you have. I will say it'll be a lot harder without a bandsaw. You can use a chainsaw, table saw, whatever you got, use it. I also made these cutouts to make it even easier. You could use a protractor, just like this, and make a circle, but because this side isn't flat, at least on the bandsaw, it'll be pretty hard to cut. Very easy cutouts, just place it, get your drill bit. Doesn't matter how deep you go because this is a live edge bowl and this is where we're gonna be hollowing it out. So don't worry about that. Start the bandsaw and cut this thing out. Alright, so here's our bowl blank. Looks pretty good. We're going to be connecting it in between centers. I think that's probably the best method for live edge bowls because you can actually readjust it while you turn. Because you don't want this being on the bark, we're going to have to clear out a little section so it has a good connection with the wood. We cleared away the bark. Still see our center point, so now it's connected to the lathe. Okay, let's straighten it out. Don't advance it too much, because we're gonna have to readjust it. So what I like to do to make sure that the wings are actually even, so I'll get my finger just like this, try not to move it, and turn. As you can see, this wing is a little bit taller, so we'll readjust it just slightly. Okay. A little bit on this side. And that's perfect. Let's turn on the lathe at the slowest speed and see if it's running good. So there's a slight wobble at 400 RPMs. Sometimes you could go a little bit faster and that wobble will probably go away. So let's crank it up just a little bit and see what happens. So now we're going at 800 RPMs, that vibration left, and now we can start turning. So first thing we're gonna do is work the sides, start that curve of the bowl, and we're also gonna try to flatten the bottom. Now let's try to flatten the bottom. As you can see, I'm not clearing away all the material. I'm leaving a little bit for my tenon. Okay, here's where we're at. Working that curve. Still got a long way to go. The bottom's almost completely flat, not all the way, so we're gonna keep on working on that. Once this is flat, we're gonna make the tenon in the foot and then work our curve. Now I'm gonna make a foot, and now work that curve. Okay, we're getting that curve right here, but don't go all the way. Since this is a live edge bowl, we want that bark on. If I would have kept on going, there would have been a good chance that this bark would just fly off. You actually want to turn in the opposite direction just for a little bit so that bark stays on. Okay, so the bark is still on. I'm going to shave away just a little bit so that line goes away. Other than that, I like the profile. We have our foot. We just need to make the tenon. So I have my scraper right here. This is what I've been using to make my dovetail tenon for the last 2 or 3 years. You could use a bowl gouge, any kind of tool that you know how to make a dovetail on, use it. I use my scraper, very simple. Push it in and you're good. Just like that, we got our tenon. You also want to make sure that this is completely flat. If you wanted to, you could also make a little bit of a recess, but then you gotta do a little bit more work taking the tenon off. If you make this completely flat and keep the tenon, you could just sand it and it'll be done. So let me make sure that this is flat. I'm gonna use my bowl gouge. All right, we're all good. Get your chuck out, flip it around. So we got the bowl flipped over. Now it's time to hollow it out. Every wood turner is pretty different when it comes to hollowing out. Some people start in the center and work their way out. I like to start on the outside and work my way in. I just like having some wood in the center. It makes the bowl feel more balanced. It's really up to you. Do it however you want to, but I'm gonna start on the outside and figure out how thin or how thick I want that rim to be. So let's turn on the lathe, start turning. I'm just getting rid of the bark right now. Okay, let's stop the lathe and see the thickness of the rim. I like my rims a little thick. This is maybe 1/2 inch. I think I'm gonna keep it just like that. So now we can actually hollow out the whole thing, go deeper, make this thing nice and even. You always want the wall thickness to be nice and even. So periodically, just stop the lathe with your fingers, feel it, and make sure it's even throughout. Okay, let's feel that wall thickness. It's even right here. I haven't really began working on the inside, or at least the middle part, I mean. So yep, feels good here. Let's work on the center. Check that wall thickness. Seems good. Now we're done turning. Now we got to sand. So I like to sand from 80 to 400. Some people sand from 80 to 320, 60 to 400. It's really up to you. Because we got some lines, we definitely got to start at 80 to get those out. If the lines were even worse than that, you might want to start at 60. When you sand a live edge bowl, make sure you're not hand sanding it. I have my drill. You get these off of Amazon. Some sandpaper. I go from 80, 120, 180, 220, 320, then 400. Use all of these. Then after that, we'll be using some Yorkshire grit, which you do not need, by the way. It's just to add a little touch to it. And then, time for finishing. Make sure you wear a face mask when you're sanding. You do not want any of this dust in your lungs. So first we're gonna sand with the lathe on, then we'll turn it off, and I'll show you what we're gonna do next. All right, I'll take my mask off really quick just for this. So we sanded the inside right here. It looks good, but as you can see, the wings still got some marks. So that's when you turn off the lathe and manually sand the wings. I also like to manually sand the middle because sometimes when you're sanding with the lathe turning on and you cross that middle point right here, right in the direct center, it'll cause a little bit of a hole. Once I'm done with these wings, I'm gonna do the exact same thing with the outside. I'm gonna start with the lathe on, then I'm gonna turn it off and sand the wings by myself, by hand. All right, so we're done sanding from 80 to 400. Now we're gonna be using some Yorkshire grit. Like I said before, you do not need to use this, but if you've never used it before, I do highly recommend it. It really makes your bowl just smoother, looks better. There's a whole bunch of benefits for some Yorkshire grit. So I like to just wipe it on everywhere. You want to be generous with it, but not too much. I will admit, I think I put a little bit too much on. Wipe it on. Then you could use a towel if you're making a regular bowl, but for a live edge bowl, you don't want your fingers in there. So I cut out this little circle from some Scotch-Brite, so I can put it right on here. And now I'm just gonna buff it off. Now look at that grain. I know I said this might be oak. 100% not oak. I'm thinking maple or something. I don't know. That's my best guess. Let me know if you guys know. So now all we're gonna do is take it off the lathe, go to the belt sander and sand the tenon off, go through the grits on the bottom, and then put some finish on and we're done. For live edge bowls, if the bark is a little iffy, if it looks like it's not attached very well, I will use some thin CA glue and just put it all around the bark. Make sure you don't get it dripping on the wood because you're gonna have to sand that out or even return it. CA glue really sticks to the wood, so just get it on the bark. It'll give it a little glossy look and it'll make it much stronger. I trust this bark, so I'm just gonna keep it like this, no CA glue. But yeah, let's take it off and sand the bottom. Okay, so we sanded the bottom. We used some Yorkshire grit as well. So now let's wipe away all this dust before we put some finish on it. I'm gonna be using Tried and True Original. For a more natural look, I like to use this. If I want it a little bit shinier, I usually use either Waterlux Gloss, some shellac, or I think it's General Finishes Wood Bowl Finish. So get some Tried and True and put it on. Put on the bark a little bit as well. But look at that grain pop. Do the bottom now. Grain is interesting. I like it. Well, here it is, guys. In an hour, I'm just gonna wipe it off, all this extra bit of finish, and that's it. It's all done. Hope you guys enjoy the video. If you stayed this far, I appreciate it. Thank you. Please hit that like and subscribe button. Stay tuned for future videos, all that stuff. See you guys in the next one. Peace.